So welcome, Daniel Vacanti and Andy Hiles. Daniel, you run Actionable Agile. Maybe you could introduce yourself a little bit to the general public who don't
Yeah,
know
yeah,
you.
yeah. Thank you very much for having me. I'm happy to be here. So, if you want me, so yes, I guess my background goes a little bit beyond actionable agile. I've been doing this agile thing for a while now. But back in 2006, 2007, I was on the team that the practices we used on that team came to be known as Kanban, for at least for knowledge work anyway. I'm not saying Kanban for car manufacturing, but at least for knowledge work. So I was on the first team that kind of practiced that, the first project team that practiced Kanban, and been focused on Kanban ever since. Yeah, I put out a metrics tool around flow metrics. But more recently, and probably more importantly, started working with Scrum.org. I think it was 2017 when I was first introduced to Scrum.org. And how do we, it seems strange that it was 2017 before, any two major, the two major theories kind of got together and started talking about this stuff. So we launched Professional Scrum with Kanban, was part of the team that launched Professional Scrum with Kanban at Scrum.org. And then even more recently than that, taking the Scrum.org model, a bunch of us in the Kanban community have gotten together and launched a community called ProKanban.org. So more information than I think you wanted to know about me, but
It's still very interesting to hear, because I think that's a nice bridge to Andy, because Andy, I think you are also involved, right, in that community, in the
In the pro
community.
Kanban for sure, yeah. Really excited. Good community. Lots going on in that. I mean, we can talk about that later. Probably put a kind of prokanban.org link out and probably kind of hype that up. But do you know what I was thinking, Dan? When you said 2006, I was thinking, right, where where was I in 2006? I think I was working for Intel, and we were doing XP at the time, and. We weren't. Yeah, I was trying to think. We were not doing anything very well. I know there was a kind of a load of people taking XP very seriously, but it seemed to I seemed to be kind of caught in this transition. I was a software developer back then, or I was I'd always say I was like a coder by Google, right? So I got by just searching all the answers.
Aren't they all? Aren't we all, right?
Yeah, but I soon learned I wasn't very good with that IntelliSense. So anybody doing what I used to call hardcore, which is like Java, anything without help, that was like a mystery to me. But yeah, so I kind of that was when when I got introduced to Kanban. Now again, I was thinking this. It was when I moved into Nokia, and I'll never forget. And I ran. It's funny. I ran past him about 2 or 3 years ago on a hill, and he was walking home from work, and I ran past this guy, and a guy called Tom Leggett. I'm not sure he was working for Oracle in Bristol. I don't know whether he's moved on now. And I remember running past him because back in about 2010-ish, somewhere around then, maybe a little bit before, he kind of said, he was kind of trying to get people interested in Kanban. And I remember kind of going, I guess it just didn't fit. I was very Scrum then, and it just didn't fit my model. And I ran past him again a couple of years ago on this hill. I went, Tom, I said, all that stuff you said about Kanban, you were absolutely bang on. And then I just kind of ran past him and left him to it. We kind of he had a big smile, and we had a chat afterwards. But yeah, that was kind of like my kind of intro to it, I guess, is kind of this slightly different way of working. But as I said, I was kind of heavy Scrum back then, so it just didn't. I guess back in 2010, where I was in Nokia, it just didn't make sense at the time. We were doing a huge transformation of a product, a rebuild, and I think it suited some of the other bits of Nokia, but it just wasn't where I was right then. So yeah, probably that's not really an intro for me, but you can find out more about me at agilrocks.co.uk or LinkedIn or those kind of things. But yeah, I just kind of I thought it was kind of cool. I was trying to think where I was.
Yeah. Well, then that's fine. And so we are all part of the professional Scrum trainer community as well, the professional Scrum community. That's also something that this video is for. I run a company with a couple of trainers, another couple of practitioners called Scrum Facilitators, and we try to promote professional Scrum like we all do as professional Scrum trainers, of course, in the community. And I think Kanban is a very important aspect also of the practice, to become more effective as a team, to create flow and to create more, more effectiveness within the Scrum teams. So let's go a little bit into that. Maybe I don't know if everybody knows. I encounter people saying, Kanban, you got this board on the wall which says to do in progress done. It might be a bit a part of Kanban, but I don't think it's the core, right? So what's Kanban all about? What's the core of Kanban? Daniel, could you elaborate a little bit?
I was going to pass that one off to Andy. At its core, if this is another shameless plug, as part of the Pro Kanban effort, we launched a Kanban guide. So if you go to kanbanguides.org, and I actually think kanbanguide.org works as well. But based on everything that we learned, again, like I said, everything that we learned about from scrum.org, just having the basis to, for common language at the very least, having something like a guide is potentially a very, very powerful tool. So if you go take a look at that Kanban guide,
we'll put it in the comments, right? So
we will. Yeah. What you will see in that very, front and center up front is the notion that really Kanban at its essence, all it is a strategy to achieve flow. Like if you had to say it in one sentence, that's what you would say. Now, unfortunately, that one sentence really doesn't mean anything, and there's 8 more pages of what that really means. But as Andy in his introduction, I think he said flow about 10 times, which is great. But that's the thing. I mean, if you're interested in flow and you're interested in achieving flow, Kanban is a strategy to achieve flow, and that strategy is made up of several tactics. It's going to be things like visualizing your work. It's going to be things like actively managing that work that's in progress, and it's going to be continuously improving the process. There are all kinds of practices and tactics that go in to make up that strategy. So in 25 words or less, that's why I would say that's where you really need to get your mindset is. Kanban is all about trying to get you to flow. I know, Andy, what else would you? Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So Andy, you as you mentioned flow so many times, what's the benefit of flow for Scrum teams?
Oh, do you know what? I'm gonna politician this answer, right? And I'm just gonna like sideline you and just kind of no. But I was thinking, I will answer the question. I feel like I'm a proper politician.
I will make sure you do.
So coming from that Scrum world, right? And I spent a lot of time going and working with teams, and the first thing I would do is say, what are we doing? How are we working? Right? Let's make that visual. And it sounds really silly, but that's what I would do. And I'm sure that's pretty much what every Scrum Master has always ever done. And they've probably done, an amount, if not all of the things, in terms of looking at how you manage workflow, creating a pull system, however that looks, trying to help teams of people work smarter, better. And when you kind of start to introduce this concept of flow, we're now starting to make just not how they work better, but the cheesy side of it is actually they feel more empowered and happier and able to make better choices about how they work. So as Dan said, it's like there are lots of tactics and ways of tuning how teams of people work or how you go and approach work. Kanban from the guy's perspective, condenses that quite neatly, but I think if you are a practitioner and you're working within a team, or you're part of a team, or you're a Scrum Master, you will be. I would be quite shocked if you're not, or you don't have any interest in improving how you work. Right? Everybody wants to work, make their lives easier. That's why we go to work. So for me, this concept of flow is beneficial right across the board. I think a lot of people get hung up on this kind of, yes, it's we're delivering product value. Yes, we are, but we're also helping the team of people around us to optimize how they work and make them slightly happier. I don't know. That's kind of like my humanizing of the benefit of looking at flow as well.
So that answers the question, right?
I hope so. You know, I don't think I swerved it that much, but
You did pretty great. Yeah. So what are you mentioned already a couple, Daniel, but what are the core concepts of Kanban? So we got, you got flow, you got visualizing work, you got continuous improvement. I hear you say, are there other aspects?
Those are the biggest ones. So the three main tactics, the three main practices, I think we call them practices. I should know this. I wrote the guide.
Practices.
The three main practices that we talk about are that it's essentially defining the way you work. That's what Andy was talking about right now. Is defining and visualizing the way that you want to work. You know, that's one practice. It's then, now once you have that workflow essentially defined, how do we actively manage items going through the workflow? Because that's essentially what flow is all about. It's like, okay, big deal. We've made our workflow transparent. So what? You know, it's like, how are we actually getting things done? So that's the active management of items that are flowing through that workflow. And then the third one is just continuously improving it. So you create a workflow, you manage the workflow, you improve the workflow. Those are essentially the tactics when we talk about Kanban. Now, layered into all of that is a whole bunch of other things. Andy mentioned pull systems. So you can talk about, working in terms of pull rather than push. We talk about controlling work in progress. Talk about the metrics that we can use to understand the health and performance of our process, and are we really as effective and efficient, as predictable as we think that we are. So we can go into those a little bit later if you want to, but I don't know if I answered the question. I don't know if I politicianed it too, but is that
No,
essentially what you're going
you
for?
answered the question.
Yeah, okay, good.
And it's not about the question, it's more about the conversation. So what I'm wondering, what I often hear people say is, we either use Scrum or we use Kanban, either way. So why do you think is that? What's the problem in sort of maybe not the practical side, but more of, is it like an image kind of thing, or is it a core thing that people say you can combine the two? What's making people choose actually between the two?
It's a good question. I don't know. That's been a lot. I personally, I've spent a lot of time trying to tell people it's okay. It's okay to. Again, coming from where I've, my software development background into product team background into kind of, coaching background. I think if you're going to sit on a fundamental track on any one of those and recognize that they can't work together, then you're kind of I think you're not really broadening your mind in that sense. Yes, there are applications where Scrum will not fit, and we know that. But I think being in 2021 as we are now, and we still have a Scrum versus Kanban thing. It's just come on, we're beyond that. As I said, if you look at even if you just started looking at, I'll go back, right? So if you are not looking at your workflow as part of a Scrum team and having a conversation at a retrospective about how your work flows through your team and gets to done, come on, that's, and again, we're in Kanban land, right? If you're not trying to look at how long work is in progress at any one time within your team and actually make strategic decisions as a team to optimize, doing the right work at the right time, then, what are you doing? And this is, and then calling one out against the other, I think is my personal opinion is silly. And I'm calling myself a Kanban with Scrum specialist, or Scrum with Kanban specialist now, which is working with teams of people and saying, hey, look, there's this really good Scrum thing over here, but actually if you start to look at just as Dan said, it's like 3 extra things with maybe some metrics around it. You can actually start to tune your teams. I call it kick-ass teams. I don't know whether we've got like a swear. I've seen Dan's podcast. It's fine. We can swear. But like kick-ass teams that you start to tune them up, right? We're starting to actually really, really, really turn the screw on the team and actually kind of go, yeah, we can be better here. Dan, I don't know whether you want to add anything on that.
Well, I mean, I think you got it all. The only thing I would add is I have argued, and I would argue that to get everything out of the Scrum framework that I think you can and that you should be getting out of the Scrum framework, you need, at some point you will need flow. I mean, you just will. I mean, that's just how it works.
Yeah.
But likewise, from a Kanban perspective, there are certain things that are just really, really useful to achieve flow. Things like, hey, maybe we should get together every so often and talk about how things are going. Hey, maybe we should have some roles that are looking after different aspects of the process or framework, or how we're working as a team, or whatever. I mean, they're just. I say this, and I don't know how many people believe me, but I'm sure they're sick of me saying this, but if you have a really, really mature Scrum team and a really, really mature Kanban team, whatever maturity means, right? But if you have a really mature Scrum team and a really mature Kanban team, a lay person looking at both of those teams from the outside, I don't think would be able to tell the difference, because they're at the end of the day, I think they're the same.
Yeah. And I think it's it's a really good point, because a layperson looking from the outside, why should they care, right?
Why would they even care? You're right. If I'm getting my stuff, why do I even care?
Yeah, well, and that's the point, right? So, and that's where I was coming from. Is if you're optimizing flow, you're not. Again, it's one of those really bad. We're going to deliver at the end type scrummy things, right? But we just shouldn't be there. We just it's 2021, guys. We just shouldn't be releasing work at the end of a sprint, which I know the large majority of people still work towards. But we should be working actually towards more. When can we deliver? When can we release? As soon as possible. Optimizing flow again. I don't know. I just go back to this. If you're doing great Scrum, if you kick-ass Scrum, you're going to be doing this stuff. You're probably just not. My story of Tom Leggett. There you go. I've said his name twice. Trying to tune the team he was working with, is he realized there was an optimization problem with Scrum, within his context in Nokia, and actually kind of reflecting on what he was trying to do at the time was actually really, really cool. Just. I will hold my hand up and just say I was kind of ignorant and wasn't paying attention. And now I recognize actually, what he was trying to accomplish with that, and I have a lot of respect for him for that.
Yeah. Oops. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, loads of oops. I think. Well, we've all, or maybe just me, but we've all been there. But I think the nice thing is being able to reflect on that and say, yeah, okay, I really get where it's going. Well, where it is, where he was trying to get it at the time.
Yeah. So we have Scrum, which is great as a framework, but when you want to create flow, and when you really want to get your team to get to that effective level, you need these practices as well. So in that case, Kanban is very important.
But I'd just say, reflect on that framework thing, right? So let's really, really just call Scrum a framework, and make it as lightweight as possible. As Dan said, right, the Kanban guide at kanbanguides.org is 8 pages. It shouldn't be any more heavyweight than that. And the Scrum guide is 14 pages. Is it 14 now?
13, 14.
14. Okay. So yes, it's a little bit more heavyweight, but actually, look at the fundamentals of what it's trying to achieve. And, we're now kind of, I know one of the topics you wanted to get onto is the kind of that reduction in the Scrum framework, but, look at the lightest weight Scrum you can go and take on board. And then start to look at those Kanban practices, and you shouldn't need something that is kind of archaic and clunky to be able to deliver work.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So let's go into the Scrum Guide 2020. We got a new Scrum Guide out last year, and it became even more framework-ish, right? So even less prescriptive, even more of a framework. So maybe even more adaptable for a lot of people, a lot of organizations, but also some things are added as well. So let's briefly go through like the major things that changed. We got like the development team as a team is removed, right? We just have one team, the Scrum team, right? With accountabilities, with a product owner, with a Scrum Master accountabilities, with developer accountabilities. What does that mean for Kanban? does that have any effect? Was it, there are no roles, there are no accountabilities described in Kanban. What's the effect that this change has on teams that practice Kanban as well?
I was going to guess Dan's brain. I'll take a guess at Dan's brain. Probably like mine, right? I would like, if you're going to just really reduce it, just get it down to the Scrum team. And, I've been, I think we talked about this last time, Jasper. I've been teaching Scrum, for the from a Scrum.org point of view for the last 3 years or so. And, the hidden role of the Scrum team, because it was never really called out. It was in there, but that kind of idea of this unit together. I don't know. I'm guessing Dan's brain, but if I could really lightweight this thing, I'd just talk about this concept of this kind of unit of team. This whether you want to call it Scrum team, I think we'd have to because it's Scrum, but it's having that as that flat level. But we've ended up with accountabilities, which is probably the closest we're going to get to that.
Yeah. So Dan, you were like all excited, thumbs up. And what's that saying?
If I'm being completely honest or completely transparent, the whole idea of a dev team, the development team, always made me uncomfortable. It always did, because I feel like in a lot of contexts, it set up this unnatural, I don't know what the word is, competition, contradiction. That there was constantly this power play, this power struggle between, this is what the development team owns and this is what the product owner owns, and how do we negotiate that thing? Whereas Andy, you're exactly right. I love what you say. If let's get past all that and let's just acknowledge we are just one unit, this one team. We have the same common goal. I think we're probably going to talk about goals here in a second. We have all this, this goal that we're working toward. So, let's get away from, well, I own this and I own that, to more for how do we work together, in order to achieve that common goal. And by the way, I'm not saying that Scrum necessarily meant for that to happen. I just think, the framework as it was stated before potentially allowed for that dynamic to emerge. So I'm just thrilled that we're moving more toward that single cohesive unit of teams.
So what's another change that you like?
that I like. Honestly, so that's by the one we just talked about is by far and away, my favorite. The other thing is more. The other thing I like is a little bit more nuanced. It's subtle, but I'll just talk about it. And again, full transparency. I've said this all the time before. The first time I actually read a Scrum guide, I think was 2017, 2018, or something like that. And I always come at this from a flow bias. I'm very biased toward flow. I always have my flow goggles on. And when I read the Scrum guide for the first time, it read like a flow document to me. That's how it read. Whether I doubt that was their intention, but that's how it read to me. So I went back and I looked at all the previous versions of the Scrum guide. So now I've read all versions of the Scrum guide, and it seems like, to me anyway, each incremental release of the Scrum guide gets closer and closer and closer to flow. And so that's what I love about this evolution, this latest version of the Scrum guide, as I think it's the closest version yet to a flow document, even above and beyond what the last version was. And so those, that's I think what excited me the most about this release. I know that's not really anything tangible, but that's how I feel. So.
Yeah. So is that relatable to some of the things that changed, or is that just like general?
I think as Andy was saying, I mean, just making in general, focusing on it being more of a framework, focusing on it more being lightweight than prescriptive, getting rid of things like, the 3 questions. I mean, why the 3 questions were ever in the Scrum guide to begin with for the daily Scrum, I will never know. But it's things like that focus less on the mechanics, on the prescriptiveness of the framework, and more on how do we achieve success
So I'll give you one to back that up, which is that line about again, one of my, I love the simplification of done. They've really made an effort to make done less. I think again it's something else we talked about previously, which was I'll never forget the internal Scrum trainer discussion on the Google group that just went on and on, because it was just that, how do you interpret done? As per guide, it just went on, and then somebody wrote an A4 summary, and I've still got it, and I printed it out for a class once just to show them, at the time, this is how complicated, getting to done is. Now it's that one line, which is the moment a product backlog item reaches done, an increment is born. So it's like, it's just, again, it's that, so you're day 3, within your sprint, and you've got an increment. So you've got something done, right? So you've got an increment, and that's how it should be. And if that increment is truly valuable, then you should be able to release it, not just wait for a package, as we traditionally do. And that's where we should be heading. That's where we should be pushing.
Which is good. This sentence is good for flow, right?
Well, yeah,
that's exactly right. Yeah, I mean, to me, the two most important words in the Scrum Guide were always "at least." In my opinion, the two most important words were always "at least," right? Mm-hmm. Because Andy was talking about, most people think, well, you have to wait till the end of the Scrum, the end of the sprint to release, or you have to wait till the end of the sprint to have an increment. That's absolutely not true. You can have an increment on day 3. You can release on day 1 if you want to. It's just all Scrum is saying that you have to have that at least once per sprint, right? We have to meet to have a retrospective at least once per sprint, right? That's to me where the more flow stuff comes in, is the team can figure out whatever cadence is right for them for some of these things, as long as it's happening at least once in this time period. That, to me, that's flow.
Yeah. So is that also something, because that's also a topic that I wanted to discuss, is that something that the sprint, some people are thinking the sprint is inhibiting flow to happen, because we've got this time box period of 2 or 3 or 4 weeks in which we ... right? So in which we, I don't know, release once at the end of the sprint and sort of build up to that, or is that the core why people think that that sort of is a mismatch, or what do you think?
Have you? I don't know whether you've heard me say this, Dan. You might like this one. So I've recently called Scrum a conversation framework, and that's the way I treat it. It could, as a trainer, you should have like a 10, 20 second version of whatever it is you're talking about. And my cheap budget version of Scrum, which is it's a conversation framework. We're going to meet regularly to have a targeted conversation about doing better. Regard that, and that's it, right? That's Scrum. And so again, I was kind of reflecting on some of the things we've been talking about, and I was thinking actually probably the what maybe it's me, maybe it's organizations, but they really don't pay attention to that we can release in 3 days. They just treat Scrum as a mechanical, every 2 weeks, well, our teams are going to give us a report. Not actually really trying to, again, tune themselves towards flow and look at how can we release within 3 days. And one of my favorite conversations, if and when I get to speak to CEOs and CIOs of organizations, is my favorite question is, what happens when something goes wrong? And they say, well, we move heaven and earth and we can get a release out within a week or something. Okay, so why can't I know why you can't do it all the time, but why can't you do that all the time? What's going to take heaven and earth to make that a regular thing? What was the value? What was the benefit of doing those? And I think that's, again, it's conversation framework, and let's kind of build upon that pattern.
It's interesting you say that, because Andy, you've probably heard me say this. What I say about Kanban is, Kanban is all about getting you to ask the right questions sooner. That's my one sentence description of Kanban. It's all about getting it's the same thing. We're saying exactly the same thing, which is fascinating. But getting back to the original question, is a sprint an inhibitor to flow? I think a sprint is only an inhibitor to flow if people think, as we were talking about before, that you have to wait till the end of the sprint to release. You have to wait till the end of the sprint to have a review. You have to wait till the end of the sprint to have a retrospective. If you think in those terms, then yeah, Scrum becomes fairly batchy and potentially can inhibit your ability to achieve good flow. It doesn't destroy it, but it certainly makes it a little bit more difficult. Once you realize that, hey, we can release whenever we want, we can retrospect whenever we want, we can whatever, as long as we're doing it within, the bounds of the sprint. Have at it. Why not?
Awesome. So Scrum is still Scrum. A framework.
Yep.
That's what I learned. Kanban still Kanban. And maybe to sort of show the effectiveness of Scrum, Kanban is very useful and maybe even needed. If I hear you say, if I talk to you guys, you would say yes anytime. You need to combine these two to create awesome teams, right? Yeah. So yeah. That's what I take from this conversation. And so what do you guys, in the Pro Kanban community, could you tell us a little bit more about that? What can people find there, and what can they discover and learn?
Andy, can I take this one, or did you want
to? No, I was really hoping you would. I mean, I can sell it from a community point of view, but yeah, you go.
Well, yeah, no, I was actually going to go from the community perspective as well. Like I said, my involvement with Scrum.org has just been eye-opening. I remember, so Louis Philippe, I don't know if everybody out there knows who Louis Philippe was, but I was doing I will never forget this. I was doing a Kanban training. He invited me up to, actually, I think it was Montreal. It's Montreal or Quebec. I can't remember where. Quebec City. I was doing a pure Kanban, whatever that means, pure Kanban training for him, up there. And we were walking across the street to lunch, and he goes, Dan, have you ever thought about talking to Scrum.org about this stuff? I'm like, Scrum.org? What? You're crazy. Ken Schwaber? What? No, what? You're just nuts. It's like, no. Trust me. I think what you're doing here would be very, very interesting to them. And so I did. And like I said, it's rare in life you can point to one of those fateful conversations, right? Where, things just fundamentally change. And, I can trace everything back to that. And I've learned so much about community and what it takes to build, a healthy set of trainers, a healthy community, a healthy, all the things. Not to say that Scrum.org is the end all be all, right? I mean, they've got their problems just like everybody else. So getting back to the question, with Pro Kanban.org, what we've tried to do is take all those lessons that we've learned from Scrum.org, because, for better or worse, I would argue the Kanban community in general has kind of lost its way. I mean, it was a wonderful, wonderful place to be, 2009, 2010, 2011, just great, intelligent, passionate people that have really just kind of, drifted apart, and it kind of just fell apart for all kinds of reasons that we don't necessarily have to get into here. And so, having the chance to work with Scrum.org made me realize that, we can get this back. We should be able to get that back for the Kanban community, but it has to be safe, and it has to be inclusive, and it has to be diverse, and it has to be open to multiple opinions, and all these things. And so that's what really Pro Kanban is. If you want to learn about Kanban and you want a safe, inclusive place to come learn about Kanban, that's what we're trying to create with ProKanban.org. So Andy, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit why you were inspired to join or whatever.
Oh God, yeah. And I think it kind of it fits with where my passion has been for the last 4+ years, I guess, which is this whole tuning teams using flow, but it's but if the Pro Kanban community, it's really looking at the chats that are going on there. You can come along and learn Kanban, and ask anybody for some help, and it's fantastic. But there are some amazing minds in there, far more brilliant than mine, into actually taking this stuff much deeper and further. We haven't really talked about metrics, but that's again a huge part of actually looking at how teams are working and optimizing. And so there's lots of people, lots of opinion, lots of really good conversation going on. There's a Slack channel. So if you go to prokanban.org, there are links. Don't know whether it's under the resources tab. I'd have to look at my browser.
I think it's under the community tab. I think it's under there's a community. Yeah.
Community. There's an open assessment for the PKT. So there's the ProKanban open assessment. So it's a very similar model. There is an assessment that people can go and validate their knowledge, and it was one of the first things I did. I was kind of interested to become a trainer, obviously. Yeah, otherwise I wouldn't have kind of continued. But for me, actually, there was nowhere I could validate what I'd learned. Scrum.org, we have our PSK, and I can learn I can kind of validate my knowledge of Scrum with Kanban. But there was nowhere I could really validate my knowledge of Kanban. So it was one of the first things I did. Is I took a risk, and and here we are. But and that's an amazing thing to be able to do now, and be able to kind of say, look, yeah, I've passed this, what is quite a tough assessment as well. So if you're watching this and you're kind of interested in Kanban and you just want to get, I've invited people who are just brand new to learning Kanban. I've invited them into the community, and they're now on the boards and they're learning. So come over to prokanban.org and get involved.
Cool. So people can learn more about Kanban there, and they can learn all about Scrum on scrum.org. And we encourage them to not stay with one, but combine and use, both.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't talked about not too much, but there is the Kanban guide for Scrum teams, which is part of the scrum.org offering. Again, absolutely. So I checked that over when the Scrum Guide got released, and actually I checked it over before here, and I was kind of like, no updates. It is still Scrum, it is still Kanban. And there are lots of similarities between the two guides, between the Pro Kanban guide and the Scrum Guide for Kanban guide for Scrum teams. You will find a lot of the I guess the practices are exactly the same, and the metrics are exactly the same. I think the language is more tuned towards Scrum in the Scrum one. That's where it is. So yeah, absolutely worthy resource. Again.
Yeah, as you can imagine, Andy. I mean, and it was by design, right? I mean, there's nothing that in the Scrum Guide that should invalidate what we're trying to do with the Kanban guide. There's nothing in the Kanban guide that should invalidate what we're trying to do with Scrum. So it kind of makes sense that as you start reading these guides, they all kind of look alike, or certainly not in contradiction in any way.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you both for having this conversation, because I learned a lot, and I think a lot of people that watch this or listen to it can also learn a lot, and then sort of have a first step onto learning even more about Kanban, about Scrum, and we encourage that, of course. So thanks a lot for this conversation, and we'll talk in the future maybe. Thanks
absolutely.
Thank you very much for providing this arena. I'm really excited for 2021 to see how these things become even closer together, right? I mean, that's to me my vision for 2021 and beyond is how do we continue these types of conversations to get us even closer together. So thank you very much for helping us to further that.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.